Good morning. All right. Thanks, Sunil, for joining me.
Of course, this is exciting.
Yes, in person.
Getting back into, in person.
My last one of these was March of 2020. And I went to Mexico 2 days later. And then I got back from Mexico, and I never left the house. And I was telling a couple of people, I did my first agency, actual large agency meeting in New Orleans last week. And I pulled out my clicker, and the batteries had melted through it. So that gives you a sense of how good it is to be back. So thanks for joining me.
Of course, yeah.
So I'm James Salwasser. I do brand partnerships for Outfront Media. Outfront is one of the largest out-of-home vendors and media companies in the U.S. We're also in Canada as well. Shout out to any Canadians. Ben, see you there. We've spoken before. That's okay. Your accent, I was going to say the accent, but I don't know if anyone else would pick up on it. So media buying and marketing innovation, how does that translate to the out-of-home world? We are doing a lot of innovative ways to buy the medium. In the past, it has pretty much been a block and hold type of medium. You want a piece of real estate, you call your rep, they block it off for you, you contract it, and the rest is history. Where we are today, there's programmatic is a big thing, so digital innovation within the screens being converted into digital screens, all of the transit screens. So if you've ridden BART recently, Outfront is converting a lot of those to digital screens so you can buy those and now have a little bit more insight into who goes by them, the audiences, and paying by a CPM as opposed to a time period. I heard a lot of creativity in the morning sessions. Out-of-home is still driven by creativity, so part of what I do at Outfront is talk to marketers and agencies to better understand how to best use the medium. And then in terms of measurement, that's also something that we're doing a lot in terms of adding attribution to the full cycle. So enough about me. Sunil, I'd love for you to give a little background in what you're doing at Canva.
Yeah. So I lead the growth marketing team at Canva, and growth marketing can mean a lot of different things at companies, but at this scale and size, it's really about building a global system of processes and teams. So we support our performance marketing efforts, lifecycle marketing efforts, some B2B efforts, and our growth creative team actually sits in my organization, as well as a really close relationship with our MarTech organization to develop tools, in-house tools, to do our media buying and measurement.
Cool. And you recently joined Canva in October of last year, so you're coming up on 1 year.
2 years.
2 years, sorry. I can do math, I promise. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing before and what led to that decision to join Canva. What about Canva made you say, this is it, this is a great opportunity?
Yeah, so previously I was at Uber, where I was leading some of the programmatic and social teams and helping to build in-house MarTech stack there, which also eventually became a customer-facing product with Uber Ads. And when I look for a new opportunity, I think about it from 3 different indices: company's mission and societal impact, the culture fit, and then the role. And I mean, when I first was introduced to Canva, I had actually never heard of it. And when I started to read more about it and hear about their mission and what they were doing and the ways that they were doing it was just really incredible. And that element around the culture, you hear a lot of these great things about this company, but then when you actually see it for in person, it's just really incredible. And that scaling of culture as we've grown, it still continues to be a really important piece of the success. And then, from a role perspective, I love building, and I was able to be at the ground floor to start to build a global organization across a variety of different areas.
Cool. So Canva's been around for 10 years, coming up on 10 years, and you've been there for a little bit. What are some of the innovations and changes that you've seen from your role, and how have you implemented them in the time that you've been there?
Yeah, so just setting the stage for those of you who are not aware, so Canva is a visual communication collaboration platform. We have over 85 million monthly active users in over 100 markets. We're profitable. We're best known for our consumer-facing product, which are for creating posters and print designs. But what a lot of people don't know is we have a lot of other different products and services. We have an education product that supports kindergarten kindergarten through the elementary, helping teachers, particularly in the pandemic, connect with students and their learning management systems. We're expanding that into universities. We support over 600,000 nonprofits and give the product away for free and help them to have a voice and have capabilities to implement their strategies. And then we have a movement now into kind of teams as well as in enterprises, and we're in the top 85% of the Fortune 500. And so what's happened is this evolution of really telling the story of how we empower people to design and democratize design across all walks of life in terms of who you are and what your role is. And the other element of that is that being able to give that voice to people. And so there are really amazing stories around how we've, rallied around Black Lives Matter or the enabling in rural Africa COVID response. But the two stories that I really love are, a 12-year-old girl who wants to get rid of plastic in Bali. She has an idea, she gets on Canva, starts to design stuff, and then over 2 years is able to implement change that actually gets that to the government level, and they're now committing to getting plastic free, and that's expanded now to 60 markets. And so that ability to actually expand that societal impact is really amazing. And then more close to home is, I was talking to someone who runs a yoga studio, and she runs her social media and designs the inside Canva, her social media, and schedules it while 2 kids are in the bathtub. So if you think about the time it takes to do that and the empowerment and the ability that you create, it's really amazing. From an innovation of marketing standpoint, I think that we've taken that approach of how do we actually pull that lens into how we approach our marketing. And so that comes from both a processes perspective, it comes from our principles perspective, and then our engagement with our community. So from a processes perspective, I think one of the innovations we've done is a typical company has a brand creative team, and they create the creative team for performance marketing and for social. What we saw is that you need to actually design for these channels and actually have that ability. So we have different teams that have the skill sets and expertise to do that work. And so we're designing natively for those channels, and we have really good embedded teams working with the channel leads. But then we actually saw, well, there was a really great stuff that the social team was doing. There's a really great stuff that the brand was doing. How do we actually collate and share? And so our ability to actually pivot and actually think about it from a collective and share best practices and take the best learnings from social and implementation of quick videos and screen grabs, as well as the brand and really beautiful aspects. And in performance marketing, everything is about splicing and cutting and kind of putting things together. So when you have a lot of clay to mold with, it becomes so much more impactful. And so we've seen that we can triple our output when you have 3 collective minds bringing creative together, as well as we see the operational improvements in terms of time to launch because you're going through these processes. And so we've built really good racing models to have those handoffs between your brand team and your performance team of creative and your social team of creative. On the principles front, I think that's also another really important piece of how we think about the values alignment to who we work with, so our partners, the engagements that we do. We want to make sure that we're being inclusive and have a diversity in terms of how we do our things. And so we look at that in terms of the creative. We do photo shoots and we go around to make sure we have that equal representation. We look to incorporate that in terms of our product as well. And then from a community perspective, we've really seen the importance of having a really engaged and active community. And so we really celebrate them and give them opportunities to share what they've been doing. And that's been really effective to create that word of mouth, because you see someone create this really beautiful thing and say, if they can create that, then I can do that as well on Canva. And so that's really been a really incredible word of mouth growth that we've had.
That's great. I love the sort of everything that you see, you sort of apply it internally and reuse that. Has that shifted any of your media buying tactics? Have you taken anything that you've learned from what your product is and then make any changes in terms of media buying from product launch to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in 2 ways, what we see, for example, is that you can take, TikTok ads and actually run them on Google when we can test that, and that actually performs really well. So the application of using a social channel ad in a non-related social channel has been effective. And then, from the innovation standpoint of like changing how we approach it, we've seen that there's sometimes the creative we see that we don't understand that breakthrough, and so we take actually a product growth-led approach where if you're in a product, you do user testing, you validate, you see how people are reacting to it, and then make decisions. But in a growth marketing world, you're doing A/B testing. You're like, let me test this button, let me test this color. So we actually combine both qualitative and quantitative, and we've done that now across both our creative and our lifecycle efforts. So we actually have a pretty good indication of how people are reacting. Do we have the right creative breakthrough? And so our latest brand campaign was really interesting because we've been talking about how will you design today, and now we're trying to talk about collaboration, and so it's how will we design together. And so when we were looking at the creative and looking at user testing, we saw that we weren't actually creating that transition and frame of mind, and so we went through some iterations, and so that before we even put media into it, we at least are directionally knowing that we're going to be successful with our creative. And I think that that's been a really great change that we've seen in terms of our ability to actually do creative breakthrough and have incremental brand lift than we would normally have, where we're doing that usually mid campaign to try to make those adjustments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are in a global role. So how do you navigate some of the things that are working here, some of the channels that are working here, channels that aren't available globally? Are there ways that you can tap into that? And what are some of the channels and ways that you're using that innovation globally?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I saw at Uber is the transition of a completely fragmented organization where every single market ran their own marketing to a completely centralized organization where we kind of lost some of that hyper-local element. And so we've kind of created that blend where we want to create the central guardrails, give playbooks to local markets, and then we have individuals in some of these key local markets who are really thinking about how we unlock that next level of growth and exploration into channels. So there's the global team with the centralized budget, and there's an additional international budget to go and explore for these particular markets. And so what we've seen is we've been able to improve 50 or 60% of performance in these markets by adding that hyper-local element and having a creative local agency with those guardrails to be able to do that work. And what we've also been able to do, which is very effective, is take a concept or a channel idea in one market, like in India, where we're seeing like TikTok's very popular here. There's banned there, so they have like Glance and Moj. We're like, okay, well, this is working really well here. Let's go try this in Brazil and find a similar type of channel and media partner. And so we're using those applications to create a similar type of engagement with other markets.
Very cool. I imagine that given the rise of creators and how many users are on TikTok, that the B2C side of things for you is really working well, and tapping into those platforms is working well. Where do you see growth opportunities outside of that, and do you think that there's challenges ahead with anything coming up in the near future for us here in the States?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you my greatest challenge, and I think this is more of an interactive, is like, so how many people have heard of Canva? Okay, how many people use it weekly in their professional lives? Exactly. So this is one of my challenges in the US particularly. We're trying to figure out how we move into this new audience and tell a new story and how our product's evolving. And then we look in India or Brazil, and these are very mobile focused heavy audiences. And so how are they actually using this product? So to be able to create a global strategy that supports very different audiences and different strategies becomes really important. And I think that what I've seen historically and what I try to do for my team is one is in terms of a mental model, and two is in terms of systems and processes. From a mental model, I tell my team, you're going to constantly be shifting your priorities. You're going to be constantly shifting your strategies. So think about designing yourself and your team and the work that you do to support that type of pivot. And then the second element is that it's very demoralizing as your budgets kind of go up and down. And so I really focus and have this instill in my team. It's not really about the budgets. It's really about the work that you do. And I think that really helps when, particularly in an economic downturn, when you cut 50-60% of your budget. The second element of that is that if you have a technology stack that understands that you can change inputs, you're able to move and pivot very quickly. And so we saw that at Uber, like when the pandemic hit, rides shut down and we had to move to Eats. And we were able to do that in a month because we had an ability from a creative tech and an optimization tech to just adjust the inputs. And so I've been really working with the team to figure out how we design a system so that whether we're doing growth or profitability, whether we're extending into different audiences, we're able to pivot and add complementary additions of audience strategies or different event optimization signals into our platforms so that we don't have to actually rebuild and recreate what we're doing.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about your team, and I noticed that you've been actively hiring, and we talk a lot about innovation in the current state of where we are in the country. There's a lot of opportunity for talent to go and find the best opportunity for them. How do you think about that and building a team, and how does that, what are you looking for when it comes to building that team?
Yeah. The two things that are very critical to the company and to me is the first is culture fit, is being able to find an individual that's going to be able to be successful and thrive in your organization. And then the second is finding someone who has complementary skill sets and will be additive to your team. And I don't think about hiring from a capacity standpoint, which I think is a very dangerous thing to do, because if you hire from a capacity standpoint, then when ebbs and flows happen. So I really think about how much can we actually have automated, and if there is work that's ebb and flow, can we have like consultants or agencies supporting that work? But the strategic efforts that happen on the team, you have a subject matter expert to actually think about that. So whether it's consumer, whether it's mobile app, whether it's B2B, I have individuals who have experience in area and domain knowledge in this space. The culture piece, I think, has really been important. And so as we scale and as we grow, we are hiring, and it takes us longer to hire individuals, but we're okay with that because we really make sure that there's that culture fit. But I think that every person who goes through our process sees the care that we do in terms of our onboarding process and the way we tell our stories, the videos. We want to help people succeed through the process. We don't want to make it, a very difficult process. And so at the end, when we have actually found the right candidate, it's very often that we're able to close them, even if the comp package is not at the same level as a competitor. And I think that speaks volumes to the way that we tell our story, the way that we kind of live up to those values in terms of that experience.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about what you preach in terms of looking at the materials that your marketing team is putting out. And I think we're all evolving. Like, we're going through these unknowns in the last couple of years. Everything works differently for everybody. How is some of the changes, and where do you think some of the marketing materials, will be coming out from the collaboration side? You were mentioning something about like having everything in one slide, one succinct story in one slide. And what are some examples there that have really worked for you guys, and where do you see that, like, all of us maybe adapting some of that?
Yeah, I think like what's interesting is we're the biggest user of our own product, and so we see this evolution. And so, for example, we only use our presentations product for how we present. And our founding team is a very focused on both the visual elements and the way that you present that information. And so it was actually a really hard change for me going from, heavy, rich data slides to telling one visual in a slide and making it a story. And so the way that we actually do our presentations are more like a story. We tell a story. And I think that in new world where you're in hybrid world, where visual communication is really critical, how do you actually be very succinct and tell that story in a very compelling way? And so these are the tools that we're starting to build. Like we see, in a distributed and hybrid work environment, how can you actually tell your story to someone in a different time zone? So we have talking presentations where you can do a voiceover. We can now do more collaboration, and we're building additional products around how you can actually add that engagement and asynchronously collaborate. So those are some of the things that we've seen that have been very effective for us. And what we now are doing is we're going into other major organizations. And initially we were trying to sell at the top to like the IT lead or the creative lead, say, hey, you should use our product. But now we go in as more as a consultant and service agency to say, what are you trying to solve for? Are you trying to get your brand kit set up across all your internal teams? Are you trying to create a new ad ID and brand design? And we actually use our product to show how we can actually accomplish those things. So I think that we've evolved into more being kind of a value-added organization versus like an organization telling you, use this and these are all the features that you have.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk a little bit about measurement. It's come up here this morning. It's why a lot of us are here. What's your view on the current state of measurement? How do you use it in your customer's journey? What are you looking at in terms of innovation? And where are we headed? And what's next for your org and as a whole?
Yeah.
Not too broad.
Yeah, I just think that measurement's fundamentally going to get harder. And so what we've really thought about is thinking about it from a more macro perspective of the decisions we can make and things that won't actually shift or change in behavior. And so some things like that is like a media mix model. The inputs don't really need to have any sort of personalized first-party data. And then if you're doing match market testing, cities and geos, and that data doesn't change. And so we use a media mix model to look at a holistic view of our decisions around how we're going to make our investments. And then we run incrementality tests by our channels and do match market testing to say, what's the incremental value and where's the diminishing curve? And we can throttle up and down in different markets and geos. So I think that from a technology standpoint, and I see Google building this and Facebook or Meta is trying to as well, is building these geo-based products to make it very actionable to create a geo-market test very easily, because it's very complicated. And if you do this in international markets, what we're seeing is a lot of these partners don't actually have that fidelity of data. And when you look at cross-device and you're looking at mobile versus desktop and web, it becomes very challenging to actually true those up. So that is where I see the technology improving, is around geo-market testing, because your first-party data, your cookie data is going to all go away. So MTA as it exists, I think it's going to be very hard to use. And you're going to need to kind of true up a macro view versus your actual channel view in terms of the improvements. And over time, I think a more sophisticated look is multiple channels running and sequential channels running to be actually to recreate an MTA model.
And what are some of the ways that you're retargeting, and how are some of the successes in channels mixing and playing with each other? What are some of the successes that you can share with people?
Yeah, I think that what I try to have my team do is 20% of their time is focused on innovation and looking at new opportunities, new tech partners, as well as new channels. And I've worked with my finance team to carve out 10% of a budget to only focus on new channel opportunities, because I see that over time you'll hit saturation with the standard channels and you're going to see diminishing returns. And so, for example, we're able to see opportunities with podcasts or with YouTube sponsorships. We're able to see performance influencers. And so these things couldn't manifest if you use the standard measurement methodologies. And so having that flexibility and room to actually explore new formats, new mediums to kind of engage your customers unlocks new opportunities. And then I have a process that we always identify is like, what does MVP look like? How do you scale that into being an evergreen strategy? And does it have a global element in terms of being able to scale either that particular channel or that type of channel into other markets to think about it? And so if we use those principles, then we can actually move a channel from being just an experimental channel to an evergreen channel over time.
Cool. Well, we're wrapping up here a little bit. So some of the fun ways, Canva in itself is marketing innovation. You literally have a tool and a platform that, anyone in any anybody who has an idea can be a marketer and market themselves. All of the innovation and time-saving tools that are out there. What are some of the fun ways that you're tapping back into your community? You shared with me an out-of-home execution last night on Instagram where their creators could upload, and part of a contest, you're winning, is it the winning style would be on a billboard?
Correct.
With
yeah.
that brand. So, are you tapping into other channels that way, where you're leveraging the community to to use the platform?
We've leveraged the creative community in a lot of different ways, but there's a new initiative that we've created called Creating Magic, and the idea is like, how do we actually celebrate and surprise and delight both our customers and create a virality from it. And so it started within social, where we were doing more of like a head-to-head competition where either creators or PT members would show the creation of something. And then we realized that this is really fun, but why don't we open this up to everyone? And so we started to create what's called a design challenge. So every week there's some theme for a design challenge that we do. And it started in our Lifecycle channel, but we saw that this was really effective. And so we have expanded it into our product and into other areas. And so the most recent one was a new example where we're like, well, what if we actually take the work that people are doing and actually use it actually as our own creative? So we have such a talented group of individuals from this creative community that we're going to have people create billboards to represent their story, how they think Canva should be represented on a billboard, and then the winners will be put actually as an out-of-home example. So it'll be fun to see that.
Yeah, hopefully on an Outfront board. We'll see. Any questions from the group?
So Keith Bendies, I know we haven't met yet, Sunil, but we do all the influencer stuff for your social team. I am curious on creator content from a paid perspective. Starting to Zara outside of the how a lot of the platforms, Meta, TikTok, are pushing to use creator content in paid media to lower CPs, et cetera. What's kind of the plan, and are you already seeing results when you start incorporating that content from a paid perspective?
Yeah, so what's interesting is there's a natural element that people already are using these channels to tell our story. And what we're trying to now think about is how we harness that to amplify that story to a greater audience. And so we're just on that journey to start to think about how we can incorporate that into paid. But I've seen it in previous worlds like that was very effective because of the authenticity that it creates. And so it's just really figuring out how you align the motivations of a creator to actually match the needs of your business and give them the right, concepts in clay to work with, but let them mold it into the way that feels authentic to their channel.
Hi, Sunil. This is Romita. I head up paid media for Amazon Music globally, so in a very similar role to yours. Really enjoyed your talk. We've talked a little bit about implementing the technology stack that allows you to seamlessly pivot and optimize to different customer actions when the priorities change. So do you have examples of what tools you found to be especially valuable?
Yeah, so my fundamental philosophy is that the intelligence engine has to live in-house. And so what we're actually working on is that because user value means different things in a different market where you're not a revenue market or you are a revenue market, you have different types of products. We're trying to build a model where the user value input can be appropriated in any sort of media partner. And so that's one example. And then from a creative tech example, what we've done is our ads are now being powered by the most recent templates for those markets. And I do this at Uber Eats as well. Is like we took the top 10 rides and the top 10 eats in a market and we were able to show those. So if you can create that relevancy and freshness, then it actually aligns to being able to do much better performance, and the time it takes and the resources required become much less.
Right. Thank you, Sunil. One thing that I'll leave with, I just love that we're here talking about something that I'm passionate about, which is storytelling. And in the marketing, innovation, and media buying, we're just making it better for more creators to do more work, to do better work, and we'll keep it up. So thank you, Sunil.
Yeah, thank you.